Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about what not to say to your single friend. If you are single, there's a chance that you might already kind of be thinking of what some of these statements are because the chances are you've probably heard them before. I just think that there are certain statements that tend to get said to singles a lot that I just think are not super helpful to hear. And so I decided to sort of compile these into a video so that maybe if you're that friend who has a single friend and they're coming to you, maybe they're discouraged or just wanting to talk about this area, and maybe you don't know what to say to them, I'm compiling these things so that you know what is not helpful to hear, but I didn't want to just leave you there. And so I'm also going to be providing a helpful alternative to each of these statements. These are things that I personally have found helpful and that I know others have appreciated, and there's sort of been a consensus in that. And so there's going to be three different things I'm going to be sharing of what not to say to your single friend, and then three different alternatives to that. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to be pointing out a common thread among the three things that are helpful to hear. So maybe try to look for it, see if you can figure it out, but if not, I'll be pointing it out at the end of the video. And the reason I want to point that out is because I think this little thing, this common thread in the helpful things to hear, this little tip that I want to provide, I think that it actually applies to much more than just singleness. I think that all throughout our lives, we're going to be surrounded by people who are walking through things that we personally have not walked through. And I think that the temptation in those situations when we have somebody that we love coming to us and they're going through something that we just quite honestly don't understand, that we haven't experienced, I think that the temptation is to just sort of say the things that we've always heard said, because we want to say something, we want to speak into them, but we don't know what to say, and so we kind of repeat things that we've always heard. And I think these statements sometimes that we repeat that we've always heard, I think that they can just be really unhelpful. And so I'm going to be pointing out just this one little tip to remember to take with you into those situations and into those conversations where you might not know how to speak into a situation. Before we get into it, if you haven't yet, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. I do all sorts of faith and lifestyle content, and I would also really love to hear from you if there's a particular video you would like to see from me. That could be more of a vlog style video, or if there's a specific book of the Bible or passage that you want to see me do a Bible study video on. I love doing those. Or if there's just a topic you would like to see me address from a biblical perspective, I would just love to hear what it is that you are wanting to hear from me. So leave a comment down below. And without further ado, let's get into what not to say to your single friend. Number one of what not to say to your single friend is maybe you're just not ready for a relationship yet. Listen, that may be true. In fact, there probably is truth to that your single friend has some growing to do, because guess what? We all do. But I think that more likely than not, that comment tends to come across as, well, you're just not there yet, but maybe one day you'll get to where the rest of us are. And that's just not helpful. Yes, while I believe that it is 100% important for you to know who you are as an individual before entering into a long-term relationship, I just don't think that that is always the reason why single people are still single. Yes, I know plenty of married people who are very mature, both spiritually and generally, but I also know single people who are just as much so. And then on the other side of things, I also know both married and single people who maybe aren't as much. And so I just don't think there's always a correlation between the two. And more than that, I think that this statement sort of positions a relationship as something it's not. It almost makes a relationship out to be a prize for achieving some certain level of maturity or holiness, when in reality, that's not what a relationship is. In reality, God actually uses relationships, whether that be romantic relationships or friendships, to make us holy as He is holy. God uses relationships as agents of sanctification to make us look more like Him. And God in His wisdom knows what each person needs to make that happen. And so for some people, He might use a season of singleness to do a certain work in them. And then for another person, He might use marriage to do the very same work in them. God knows what we need. I was actually just talking to a friend about this, and we were talking about how I feel like for me, a lot of the ways that I have grown in singleness and on my own, and the ways that God has used that to shape me and to bring me into more of who I am, God has also done those exact same things in my friend's life through marriage. And for her, He used marriage to be a vehicle of that growth and of that transformation. And for me, it was singleness. And so I think that we need to stop positioning a relationship as sort of a prize for achieving a certain level of growth, because it's not. The reality is that God is always growing us and always molding and shaping us in every season of life. And in every season of life, we should be actively seeking that. What to say instead? Maybe instead of assuming the reason why your friend is still single is because they still have some growing to do, recognize that regardless of the why any of us is in the season that we're in, God is always faithful to teach us in it. And so ask your friend about it. Ask them, what are you learning as you wait on God in this area? What is God revealing to you about Himself in this situation through this. By asking these questions, you are inviting a conversation, you are creating an opportunity to just hear more of your friend's heart, to know them more, and then I think in that you're also helping your friend to see the purpose in the exact season they're in. Number 2 of what not to say to your single friend is, well, I know so-and-so is single. I'm really bad at winking. I'm gonna be really careful here because I actually think setups can be a really good thing. I have gone on some really great dates through being set up, but don't suggest setting your friend up with your mom's friend's third cousin 5 times removed simply because they're both single and have a pulse. I guess what I'm trying to say is to just be thoughtful with it if you are going to set your friend up. For most single people I know, they aren't single simply because they haven't had the opportunity to be in a relationship. They're single because they haven't found the right person, or maybe for whatever reason it just hasn't worked out with people they have seen potential in. And so I think that just suggesting a setup without really giving any thought to it when 2 people are clearly not a fit can be really discouraging to your friend, or maybe even make her feel like, well, I'm just gonna have to be with somebody because they're available, not because they're somebody that I could really see myself partnering my life with. But on the flip side, suggesting a setup when you have put a little bit of thought into it and you think that there's a chance that these 2 people could be a fit, even if you're wrong, even if it doesn't ultimately work out, I think that your friend will appreciate that because the intentionality there will make her feel seen, known, and thought of. All that to say, setups are good, and I don't want to discourage that in any way, and sometimes people end up with people that are totally not what they expected or not what you think might be a good fit. All I'm saying is that if you're gonna do it, try to have some level of thought in it beyond simply, well, they're both single. What to say instead? Yeah, encourage your friend to be open. Encourage her to go on that date with that guy, even if she doesn't think she sees something initially. I think that even if it ultimately doesn't work out, those things are always helpful because you learn through those experiences, and if anything, you just get more comfortable with dating. So encourage your friend to be open, but at the same time, don't pressure her to make something work if it simply isn't there. But do ask her questions about maybe why it wasn't there, because again, this is gonna help her learn. I remember a couple years back, I had a friend ask me, when you know you don't see something with a guy, like why? What is the reasoning for that? And I really appreciated that question because it gave me a chance to explain my heart and to feel known and understood in that. And I think that to anyone, that would feel a lot better than someone assuming you aren't giving it a chance or that you have these crazy unrealistic expectations simply because you haven't met your match yet. And so give your friend that opportunity to explain where she's coming from, ask her questions about what she's learning, about what she does and doesn't like as she's going on these dates, and ask her what it is that she's looking for. Again, seek to know your friend and to understand her more. Number 3 of what not to say to your single friend is, it will happen when you least expect it. Isn't that all of our favorites? Other unhelpful variations of this include, you just need to find your full satisfaction in God, and maybe you just need to stop thinking about it. That's probably why it's not happening. Or you just need to trust God. Thank you, person, for suddenly making me feel like I'm not. Yes, of course we need to find our fulfillment, our identity, our satisfaction in God. Of course we need to trust God, but the problem with it'll happen when you least expect it is that it makes your friend feel guilty for wanting it. And how crazy is that when God created us with a desire for relationship? This is something I talked more about in my video, How to Be Content in Your Singleness. The reality is that sure, there have been plenty of people who have found their person when they were least expecting it, but there were plenty of other people who found their person when they were actively seeking out a relationship. We can't make our personal experience the rule of how it's going to happen for all people, and we can't make marriage out to be some prize for ultimate and perfect contentment. If you didn't watch the How to Be Content in Your Singleness video, check that out because I shared a Matt Chandler quote in there that directly speaks into this, and it is so good and so needed. But the reality is that contentment ebbs and it flows, and it's something that we should be continually moving toward. But if we had to arrive at some state of perfect nirvana contentment before we entered into marriage, then I don't think anybody would ever get married. The reality is that marriage is not some reward for perfect contentment, but rather the journey there is one of life's many opportunities to practice it. What to say instead? Simply acknowledge that, you know what, maybe it will happen on a day that you're doing totally great and you're not at all expecting it, or maybe it'll happen on a day when the waiting hurts and it's all you see. And remind your friend above all else that both days are okay to have. Be the person who is there for your friend on those days when they're just sad. And I'm not saying to let your friend wallow in self-pity or to just stay in those sad emotions all of the time. Remind them of the good in their life, remind them of the work that God is doing now, but also acknowledge that it is okay to have those days where they're sad. All right, so those are the 3 things of what not to say to your single friend. Now for the little commonality that runs through all of those 3 things that are helpful to hear. And the commonality is this: learn to lead with asking good questions rather than assuming you know the answer. Again, I think that sometimes oftentimes when we're in those situations where we don't know exactly how to speak into them or what to say, we can sort of just try to come up with something because we feel like we need to have something to speak into that situation. But I think that this can oftentimes, at least speaking for myself, come from this place of pride of feeling like we need to have the answers, when in reality what we really need is to recognize that maybe we just need to understand it better first. We need to understand where that person is coming from, especially if we are trying to speak into a situation that we don't really have personal experience with. I think that it is always best to lead with questions, to lead with trying to understand that person and where they're coming from and what they're going through in that situation. And so again, I think that that is a helpful tip to take into all sorts of different situations where you just might not know how to speak into something that your friend is going through. I think a go-to question that is really helpful in those situations is to just start by saying, what do you need from me in this? What is most helpful to you as a friend? How can I love you in this? But even then, don't get hung up on trying to have the right questions. I think that just by asking questions, you are creating an opportunity to know your friend more. And I think that we all want to feel understood. We all want to feel known in the things that we're going through. And so I think that no matter what, if you are seeking that out, if you are seeking that ability to know your friend more and what they're going through, no matter what, that is going to make them feel loved. I'm not saying there's no place for advice. I think that the best friendships are those ones where you can be completely honest and speak that hard truth into each other's lives. But I think it's a good rule of thumb to always, before we speak, to first seek understanding. Singles, please keep in mind that even the people who say the unhelpful things that we talked about in this video, that more likely than not, they are well-meaning. More likely than not, they are uncomfortable at seeing you sad or discouraged, and they want to be able to help and they don't know how to help, and so they're trying to say something, and so they say something they've heard before, and they're coming from a good place. Remember that, give them grace. It's likely that they maybe don't know exactly what it's like to be in your situation in the same way that you might not know what it's like to have gone through the things that they have gone through. And so give grace, recognize they're coming from a good place, and then, just send them the link to this video. I'm really bad at winking. On all sides, and I know that this is something that I need to do, we need to try to refrain from just these knee-jerk responses and instead learn how to listen well. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. I always love to hear from you and just interact with you down there. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.